Hello everyone, my name is Coralie Siegel. I am a committee member of the Future of Meetings. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we are meeting on today and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. I am delighted to introduce our invited speaker, Dr. Nicky Ringland. She is a technologist, entrepreneur, educator, and champion for computer science and technology outreach. Nicky completed a PhD in computer science at the University of Sydney and is a co-founder of Grok Learning, a startup with a mission to teach students to solve problems with code. She currently works as a product manager at Google Australia and is named one of Australia's superstars of STEM and 2018 AFR Woman of Influence. Nicky is passionate about language, tech, and teaching the next generation the skills they need to become the creators of tomorrow. Today, she will talk to us about the future of education. Over to you, Nicky.
The future of meetings, a virtual education. I'm Dr. Nicky Ringland. Let's start with a story. It's 9:55, December 25th. The year is 1900. John W. Atkins, the manager at International Ocean Telegraph Company, is attempting to make the very first international phone call from his office in Key West to Havana, Cuba. It's not going well. The Florida Times-Union quoted him as saying, "For a long time there was no sound except the roar heard at night sometimes caused by electric light current." He continued calling Cuba, and finally the words came back, "I don't understand you." You might be familiar with the 2020 version of this. You're on mute. You're on mute. Now, technology here enabled a great leap forward and a new future of communication opened up, but it took 20 years, 50 years to really revolutionize how people communicate. And ultimately, that's what technology is, an enabler of the future. At the same time in France, a series of postcards were commissioned for the 1900 World Exhibition in Paris, depicting life 100 years in the future, in the far-off 21st century. I want to run a few past you based on these futuristic technologies that I think were particularly on the money. Here we see the phonographic message, voice messages. Yep, that checks out. This one is dictating mail, speech recognition software. Tick. This one is great. It's correspondence cinema, video chat. Wildly inaccurate, of course, because nobody is wearing pajamas or Ugg boots. And this one, underwater croquet, well, maybe this one is a sign of things to come. But then there's this one, at school. And I know what you're thinking, education hasn't panned out like this at all. There are two main obvious things. Firstly, teachers, by and large, have lost the bow ties. And the second is that amazing teacher-to-student ratio. I mean, there's even a teacher's aide. But if we're really honest, it's not that different from a lot of education right now. I've certainly had classes that consisted of the teacher reading out the textbook. So this image shouldn't be the pinnacle of aspirational education. It's basically the exact same method of education, instructor-centered, content-oriented lectures that formal education has had for centuries. Here's a depiction from 1350 by Laurentius de Voltolina. The students are chatting, this one's asleep, that one's daydreaming, and these ones are reading the textbook. And here's that same classroom nearly 700 years later, and the same human behaviours. Well, except for last term, when the classrooms ideally looked more like this. More often, a few were missing, and occasionally looked like this, mostly by design. Some classes coordinated their efforts to all turn off their cameras and change their names to reconnecting at the same time. A lovely trick for their teacher. But we know that lectures aren't ideal for learning, so why do we keep using them? Well, they're cheap and they scale. And teachers are familiar with that method of instruction. They themselves were taught that way, and they work all right, especially if everyone learns at the same rate. But we know that they don't. Consider an alternate personal history. You get a cold. So you miss a few classes, you fall behind because you learn things at a bit slower rate than your peers, or maybe you don't get as much help from your parents at home. The class has just learnt a new topic, multiplication, there's a test and you pass, but is 60% really a guarantee that you've properly internalised the concept? And the class has a schedule and it's time to move on, and that next thing that we learn that builds on that concept, that key foundational component that you really should spend a little bit more time on. But the ramifications of that and your lack of confidence compound lesson on lesson, year on year. Now, at what point do you start internalising that you're just not good at maths? What you need is a teacher who can give you personalised attention. To you as a kid, to every kid. What I'm talking about here is Bloom's 2 sigma problem, a 2 standard deviation improvement when you're taught by a tutor in one-to-one individual learning rather than from a teacher in a classroom setting. That's 2 standard deviations of room for improvement in how we teach, because every student will stumble at a different point and race ahead on some topics. But we need to support each individual's learning. Students need personalised feedback at the moment of learning so they don't cement misconceptions. The teacher needs to know exactly when to intervene to have maximum impact and to help each student experience success, because that's what we really need. Every student to experience repeated success with learning. That's far more important than them learning things at the same rate. It really doesn't matter if my kid is reading at a 5th grade level, so long as they're learning and progressing and that trajectory is good and that they remain engaged learners. And yes, this probably means rethinking standardised testing and NAPLAN, and this might be a pre-recording, but even so, I'm pretty sure I can hear teachers cheering from the audience. So let's take a step back here. The concept of personalised learning isn't new, and it's not that hard to enact. If we were to double the number of teachers, okay, we might need to pay them a decent salary and enact sweeping societal changes such that they're trusted and respected, but personalised learning is absolutely something we can achieve. At the moment, we've got a class, say 50 minutes, you've got 25 kids, that's 2 minutes per student. And if we double the number of teachers, that's 4 whole glorious minutes of personalised feedback, but nevertheless, it's a start. And while we're waiting for that to happen, we can use technology to help scale our impact, because that's something technology is great at. I'm going to give you 2 case studies. The first is the National Computer Science School. The summer school is a 10-day residential camp for about 100 teenagers from across Australia and New Zealand. It's an amazing experience. Kids find their tribe, they learn some great skills, and they get inspired by our fabulous tutors. It can be truly life-changing for kids who attend, but it doesn't scale. Even before COVID, I couldn't fit 1,000 students into Sydney Uni's undergraduate labs. So more than a decade ago, we started the NCSS Challenge, an online programming competition that teaches students about computer science and coding as they participate. They learn as they go along. It's all online. We have a bunch of volunteer tutors to answer questions and help when kids get stuck. And as a teacher, you also get to see exactly how your students are progressing, which means you can know where you can most meaningfully intervene and help. This has allowed us to really scale our impact. This year, 15,000 students are learning to solve problems with code as part of the NCSS Challenge, which is happening right now. And Grok Learning, the startup that we founded to build this platform, has had hundreds of thousands of students learn using our hands-on, interactive, problem-based learning resources. A long way from a lecture. Now that's really important here. That technology has enabled us to scale but remain interactive. The students are engaged, not just sitting passively, and the teacher is enhanced, supported, augmented, and not replaced by a book mulcher. Teachers can see exactly where they're needed, they can intervene for each student and make a real difference, and technology has enabled this. But in order for these learning environments to really work, We need to ensure they're designed to keep students engaged, to facilitate dialogue and relationships, and the sort of stuff that you get for free from being in a classroom where the teacher knows you, your name, your story. Because that's the thing about online learning. Everyone is 10 pixels away from that close button. So you've really got to pull out all the stops to keep your students or your audience engaged. So that's something we learnt by experience as part of another outreach program, the Girls Programming Network, GPN. So we run free workshops for primary and high school girls to teach them how to code. It's not school. No one is forced to attend. So if we want students to be engaged and to keep coming back, we need to make sure it's fun. The pizza certainly helps. 10 years ago, we were faced with an issue. We were running weekly after-school sessions, but it was hard for the girls to attend all of them. So each fortnight, we'd run a virtual session. The idea was that our students would log on to IRC, yes, old school internet relay chat, this was 10 years ago, and we'd help them answer programming questions and help work on their projects. It did not go well. It was really hard to get some of the girls to log into the chat program. So we tried a different chat program and that didn't work any better. Video conferencing did exist at the time, but we were worried about the bandwidth that the students had at home. At the time, Skype had a 4-person limit, so that didn't work, though as it turned out, most weeks only 1 or 2 kids logged on, so it probably wouldn't have been our limiting factor anyway. At the end of term, it was clear to us that the reason that students come to our extracurricular activities isn't for the coding, but rather it's for the social aspect, for us, for their peers, and that just didn't translate online. Virtual GPN just wasn't the same experience. So earlier this year, when we had to change our now much larger in-person workshops to online experiences, I was more than a little nervous. This time, the technology was a bit better, sure, but the biggest change was that we knew the most important thing was not the image quality or how good the activity was, but rather that social element, connection with peers and fun. Our virtual workshops now all start with icebreaker games. The kids have bingo boards of activities to do for imaginary internet points. They make origami animals, they do star jumps, they draw their GPN team logos, and we're continuing to tweak things. We swapped out the long lectures for shorter ones in the timetable, and then we iterated again, opting for floating lecturers who drop in and give just-in-time learning. And because GPN isn't school, and there's no test at the end, no NAPLAN, no HSC, and because we're supported by technology, we can offer something far closer to personalised learning and personalised connection to these kids. And the girls turned up, and they stayed all day, and they had fun, and they learnt things, and then they showed up to the next workshop too, and they brought their friends. The takeaway here isn't that all learning should be online, but that what we're experiencing now, all of this, is an opportunity to reassess some big societal and educational questions and identify opportunities. We should use this as a chance to critically assess the educational practices that we have unconsciously inherited. Maybe we can ditch a few, but at the least, maybe we can take some of what we've been learning, that interpersonal relationships are critical, that accessibility and equity improvements take effort but are possible, and that nobody really wants to pay attention for an hour, and that as we move forward into whatever the future brings, we take the best of what we've learnt with us. Much like meetings, the future of meetings isn't no meetings. Much to the disappointment of many students, the future of education is not no school. But we can work to make it more inclusive, more supportive, and more fun for everyone involved. That's my hope for the future of education.